What if I were to tell you that this new Black River Infinimist setup actually destroys bosses and does crazy single target damage? I'm telling you guys, this new build is crazy. You can see me already completely obliterating 80s and 85s. I can already clear up to a 100 playing this build, and my gear sucks. And let me tell you, this build scales absurdly hard with stats. Yes, every build scales with stats, but as you're going to see when we get into this build, it scales extremely hard with stats. I would not be surprised at all if you ended up seeing this build clear up to a 110. I would not be surprised at all if you could see this build doing speed 95s. This is an extremely powerful build with a lot of potential. You can see that in single target, I'm able to already get up to a 100 mil dot tick, and everything about this build is just incredible. So what is happening? Well, there's a bunch of different pieces here, and some new techs and some old techs, and everything is combining into this powerhouse. The first thing I want to talk about, are you seeing my uptime on Army of the Dead? Even in single target, my Army of the Dead is nearly 100% uptime. Once I perfect my gear, it is going to be easily 100% uptime. This means we are generating an absolute ton of corpses constantly. And of course, with the way Black River works, the more corpses you have, the more damage you do. So this ends up being a ginormous damage multiplier. On top of that, because of the way that the masterworking and greater affixes work, we're able to get a ton of ranks of Hewed Flesh, with a perfect Black River going all the way up to 6 ranks of Hewed Flesh, which is kind of insane. This means our corpse generation in AoE is astronomically absurd, and our corpse generation in single target is very good. On top of the extra ranks of Hewed Flesh, we're also getting tons of lucky hit chance. Way more than we used to be able to get. This means that, we're getting more ranks of Hewed Flesh, so our corpse generation is going up, and we're getting the increased lucky hit, and you can see that this is like exponentially more corpses than we used to be able to generate. And finally, the 100% uptime on Army of the Dead is obviously generating an absurd amount of corpses, even in single target. Now, this build would not be complete, though, without the next thing, which is the Aspect of Explosive Mist paired with Black River. The Aspect of Explosive Mist makes it so whenever you're blood misting, you're constantly casting corpse explosions, right? And those corpse explosions consume the Black River to eat 5 total corpses. Now, with the Aspect of Explosive Mist, anytime we explode a corpse while we're in Blood Mist, we reduce our cooldown by 0.6 seconds. 0.6 times 5 is 3, and this procs 3 times per Blood Mist, which is 9 seconds off of the Blood Mist. And you can see the cooldown is only 13 seconds, and the duration is 3 seconds. So all we need to do is get like 1 tick of Decrepify, and our Blood Mist is 100% uptime. How incredible is that? This build is quite amazing. A very important piece of this build is Wither. So as you can see, with the Lucky Hit and Hewed Flesh, we're getting crazy amounts of stats, and this build scales ridiculously well with stats, but this really doesn't complete the picture until you look at Wither. Wither is a paragon node that actually scales exponentially the more intelligence you have. Every single point of intelligence that you get is more valuable than the previous point of intelligence. And you can see, even with my bad gear, I'm already at 2100, but theoretically I can get this up to 2700 plus. This means that Wither becomes a ginormous damage multiplier. And when you start to combine like the crazy lucky hit chance with Hewed Flesh, with these massive damage multipliers, you can start to see why this build is so crazy. But there was one more set of interactions that were discovered recently that took this build from, yeah, it's a good build, to this build could potentially be S tier. Those interactions that were discovered were how additive damage is currently working with damage over time, and also how the aspect of retribution and the aspect of concussive strikes are working. Now, let's start with the additive damage, because this one is very interesting, to say the least. So, damage over time, additive damage, working totally normally, okay? Nothing weird happening there. But with normal additive damage, things like plus to darkness, things like plus damage, plus to CC'd, for some reason with damage over time effects, these effects are double dipping. This means that you are getting double the value out of all of your additive damage that isn't specifically damage over time. That is a very large increase in damage. And with the aspect of retribution and the aspect of concussive strikes, these multipliers are also double dipping. Retribution is being applied twice against CC'd enemies. That's 1.3 times 1.3. That means you're getting like 1.7 something damage from the aspect of retribution against stunned enemies. And then obviously concussive strikes is 20%, 1.2 times 1.2. Very substantial damage increases. So you can start to see how We're getting absurd corpse generation, more corpses than we could ever get in the history of the build. We have these, the Wither node, where we're able to get so much intelligence that this thing just scales out of control. We're able to get crazy amounts of additive damage because additive damage is double dipping. And then the Retribution and Concussive Strikes are also double dipping. So you can see how the build is doing so much damage, but how is it getting such good uptime in Army of the Dead? Well, the answer to that is a combination of the Fast Blood aspect, which makes it so whenever we pick up a Blood Orb, we reduce our ultimate cooldown by 2.5 seconds, combined with the aspect of the Embalmer, where whenever we consume a corpse, we have a 30% chance to spawn a Blood Orb. Of course, we are running these Sacrilege Rings, so we're constantly casting Corpse Explosions every 1 second, and we're running the aspect of Explosive Mist, so whenever we're in Blood Mist, we're also casting Corpse Explosion every 1 second. So we're getting 2 Corpse Explosions a second. Black River makes it so that we're eating 5 corpses per Corpse Explosion, and you can start to see how this is working. As long as we're eating corpses consistently and consistently generating them, we're picking up the Blood Orbs to reduce the cooldown on Army of the Dead, we're going to have crazy uptime. Now, you can see that lucky hit chance, ranks of Hued Flesh are extremely important because the more corpses we generate, the more damage we do, but also the faster we can get our Army of the Dead back up. And you can see once you get to the point where you have 100% uptime in single target, that is when the damage of the build really starts to skyrocket. Now, you really don't need the Fast Blood aspect in AoE, but for single target, it is exceptionally strong. I do want to talk a little bit about the boss rotation. What you're trying to do is you're trying to line up a big stagger window where your Blighted aspect is up, where you have 20 corpses on the ground, and then the boss gets staggered. Because remember, Retribution is double dipping. We have Gloom, which I need to test if these are, or rather Terror. I need to test whether this is double dipping, but this gives us a massive multiplier. We have the Glyphic Control. And we have all these massive damage multipliers that are going off when the boss is staggered. So, your goal is to have 20 corpses on the ground, you want to have Army of the Dead running, you want to have your Blight on the boss for the 20%, and then you're going to sit there and you're going to manually cast Corpse Explosions during all of that, and that's how we get to the 100 million damage dot tick. And I would not be surprised once this build is fully optimized if we weren't ticking for 200 million plus, and you start to see this build really go off. I'm super excited to keep pushing this build, guys. Like I said, the current build's linked in the description below. Please check out my stream. I'm actually in the process of moving, so I'm gonna be missing for about 5 days. But when I get back, man, we are going all in on this build, and I really believe that we can make this build good. So feel free to check out my stream. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Peace out.